Hello, hello, and welcome back to Story Time with Dottie. Hello, Clem Pandago and Kirk and Doc Michael. Yes, it is indeed Wednesday already. I didn't do it last week because I had Brian Stavely on my channel to talk about the Mandela effect. And I think the week before that I was sick. Hey, Sue! And I was debating not doing it tonight because I'm just so tired. I was smoking off a blunt earlier, and man, sometimes they just make me so sleepy that I can't really do anything. But I figured I should do it. So, Eric DeLeon, hello. I feel like I haven't seen you about 2 months. I mean, it hasn't been that long because I did start this book, The Silver Chair, but that's definitely been a couple weeks because then I was sick, then I did a different stream. It's just been all over the place, whatever. But yeah, I'm back tonight, so we're gonna read another 2 chapters, and hopefully I don't put any of you to sleep, but especially hopefully I don't put myself to sleep. I was yawning quite a bit before I flipped on the stream, so I'm super tired. Sleepy just finished eating a big dinner. Yeah, I had a pretty big dinner too. My mom made this chicken Alfredo pasta with peas, and yeah, I did a workout and then I ate that, and now I'm just ready for sleep. But after my stream, I have to do a quick painting because I'm painting every day. So I have to do a quick painting. Definitely going to be a quick one because ready to hit the hay. But I like Alfredo sauce too. It's really good, especially if you put a ton of garlic in it. It's the only way to do it. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, you can join me on Monday. It's going to be me and Waters Above. We're going to do Waters World Conspiracy Trivia. And so Monday Night Trivia will be coming back. And yeah, it's going to be a good time. So be on my channel, and then we will probably end up switching and doing every other week. My channel, her channel, you know. How have you been? Are you doing? How am I doing on the RV search? If you have to go to bed, you don't have to do this. No, I mean I'm already here now, so I'm not gonna shut it down. And I am waiting to hear back if I qualify to buy a house up in the northern peninsula area of Washington. So, waiting to hear back about that. But yeah, I'm excited that it's almost springtime, which means it's almost time to start seeds for summer. Like if you're going to be growing tomatoes or peppers, generally want to start those in February or March so that they get big enough to be put outside by the time the frost is done. So I'm very excited that spring is coming back around. Yeah, it's just a great time. So we're going to get into it because if I just stop talking, I'm going to get sleepy and then I probably will shut this off. But we're continuing the Silver Chair in the Chronicles of Narnia series, and we're on chapter 3. So sit back and enjoy the story. Chapter 3, The Sailing of the King. Jenny T. A. Murphy, hello. What made Scrub look so dingy, and Jill too, if she could only have seen herself, was the splendor of their surroundings. I had better describe them at once. Through a cleft in those mountains which Jill had seen far inland as she approached the land, the sunset light was pouring over a level lawn. On the far side of the lawn, its weather vanes glittering in the light, rose a many-towered and many-turreted castle, the most beautiful castle Jill had ever seen. On the near side was a quay of white marble, and moored to this the ship, a tall ship with high forecastle and high deck, gilded with crimson, with a great flag at the masthead, and many banners waving from the decks, and a row of shields bright as silver along the bulwarks. The gangplank was laid to her, and at the foot of it, just ready to go on board, stood an old man. He wore a rich mantle of scarlet, which opened in front to show his silver mail shirt. There was a thin circlet of gold on his head. His beard, white as wool, fell nearly to his waist. He stood straight enough, leaning one hand on the shoulder of a richly dressed lord who seemed younger than himself, but you could see he was very old and frail. He looked as if a puff of wind could blow him away, and his eyes were watery. Immediately in front of the king, who had turned round to speak to his people before going on board the ship, there was a little chair on wheels, and harnessed to it a little donkey, not much bigger than a big retriever. In this chair sat a fat little dwarf. He was as richly dressed as the king, but because of his fatness, and because he was sitting hunched up among cushions, the effect was quite different. It made him look like a shapeless little bundle of fur and silk and velvet. He was as old as the king, but more hale and hearty, with very keen eyes. His bare head, which was bald and extremely large, shone like a gigantic billiard ball in the sunset light. Farther back in a half circle stood what Jill at once knew to be the courtiers. They were well worth looking at for their clothes and armor alone. As far as that went, they looked more like a flower bed than a crowd. But what really made Jill open her eyes and mouth as wide as they would go, was the people themselves. If people was the right word, for only about 1 in every 5 was human. The rest were things you would never see in our world. Fauns, satyrs, centaurs, Jill could give a name to those, for she had seen pictures of them. Dwarfs, too, and there were a lot of animals she knew as well. Bears, badgers, moles, leopards, mice, and various birds. But then they were so very different from the animals which one called by the same names in England. Some of them were much bigger. The mice, for instance, stood on their hind legs and were over 2 feet high. But quite apart from that, they all looked different. You could see by the expression in their faces that they could talk and think as well as you could. Golly, thought Jill, so it's true after all. But next moment she added, I wonder, are they friendly? For she had just noticed on the outskirts of the crowd 1 or 2 giants and some people whom she couldn't give a name to at all. At that moment, Aslan and the signs rushed back into her mind. She had forgotten all about them for the last half hour. Scrub, she whispered, grabbing his arm. Scrub, quick, do you see anyone you know? So you've turned up again, have you? Said Scrub disagreeably, for which he had some reason. Well, keep quiet, can't you? I want to listen. Don't be a fool, said Jill. There isn't a moment to lose. Don't you see some old friend here, because you've got to go and speak to him at once? What are you talking about? Asked Scrub. It's Aslan, the lion. It says you've got to, said Jill despairingly. I've seen him. Oh, you have you? And what did he say? He said the very first person you saw in Narnia would be an old friend, and you'd got to speak to him at once. Well, there's nobody here I've ever seen in my life before, and anyway, I don't know whether this is Narnia. Thought you said you'd been here before, said Jill. Well, you thought wrong then. Well, I like that. You told me. For heaven's sake, dry up and let's hear what they're saying. The king was speaking to the dwarf, but Jill couldn't hear what he said, and as far as she could make out, the dwarf made no answer, though he nodded and wagged his head a great deal. Then the king raised his voice and addressed the whole court, but his voice was so old and cracked that she could understand very little of his speech, especially since it was all about people and places she had never heard of. When the speech was over, the king stooped down and kissed the dwarf on both cheeks, straightened himself, raised his right hand as if in a blessing, and went slowly and with feeble steps up the gangway and on board the ship. The courtiers appeared to be greatly moved by his departure. Handkerchiefs were got out, sounds of sobbing were heard in every direction. The gangway was cast off, trumpets sounded from the deck, and the ship moved away from the quay. It was being towed by a rowing boat, but Jill didn't see that. Ariel, hello! Now, said Scrub, but he didn't get any further because at that very moment a large white object, Jill thought for a second that it was a kite, came gliding through the air and alighted at his feet. It was a white owl, but so big that it stood as high as a good-sized dwarf. I mean, that owl is probably as tall as Joe Rogan. It's crazy. It blinked and peered as if it were short-sighted and put its head a little to one side, and in a soft hooting kind of voice, to who are you two? My name's Scrub, and this is Pole, said Eustace. Would you mind telling us where we are? In the land of Narnia, at the king's castle of Cair Paravel. Is that the king who's just taken ship? Too true, said the owl sadly, shaking its big head. But who are you? There's something magic about you, too. I saw you arrive. You flew. Everyone else was so busy seeing the king off that nobody knew. Except me. I happened to notice you flew. We were sent here by Aslan, said Eustace in a low voice. To who, said the owl, ruffling out its feathers. This is almost too much for me. So early in the evening, I'm not quite myself till the sun's down. And we've been sent to find the lost prince, said Jill, who had been anxiously waiting to get into the conversation. It's the first I've heard about it, said Eustace. What prince? You had better come and speak to the Lord Regent at once, it said. That's him over there in the donkey carriage, Trumpkin the dwarf. The bird turned and began leading the way, muttering to itself, Woo, to who? What a to-do! I can't think clearly yet. It's too early. What is the king's name? Asked Eustace. Caspian the 10th, said the owl, and Jill wondered why Scrub had suddenly pulled up short in his walk and turned an extraordinary color. She thought she had never seen him look so sick about anything. But before she had time to ask any questions, they had reached the dwarf, who was just gathering up the reins of his donkey and preparing to drive back to the castle. The crowd of courtiers had broken up and were going in the same direction, by ones and twos and little knots, like people coming away from watching a game or a race. To who? Ahem, Lord Regent, said the owl, stooping down a little and holding its beak near the dwarf's ear. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if everybody is sleeping. I'm really trying to stay on topic because I'm really tired too. So if I go off the rails too much, I'll probably just fall asleep. Wouldn't that be funny if I fell asleep on a live stream? I'm sure it's bound to have happened, but maybe good that I'm standing, so I hopefully won't fall over. What's that? Said the dwarf. Two strangers, my lord, said the owl. Rangers, what do you mean? Said the dwarf. I see two uncommonly grubby man cubs. What do they want? My name's Jill, said Jill, pressing forward. She was eager to explain the important business on which they had come. The girl's called Jill, said the owl as loud as it could. What's that? Said the dwarf. The girls are all killed. I don't believe a word of it. What girls? Who killed 'em? Only one girl, my lord, said the owl. Her name is Jill. Speak up, said the dwarf. Don't stand there buzzing and twittering in my ear. Who's been killed? Nobody's been killed, said the um hooted the owl. Who? Nobody. All right, you needn't shout. I'm not as deaf as all that. What do you mean by coming here to tell me that nobody's been killed? Why should anyone have been killed? Sorry. Yeah, I mean, it's still on video of when my granny scared me and I fell over. So, you know, why wouldn't we record it when I fall asleep and fall over? All right, you needn't shout. I'm not so deaf as all that. What do you mean by coming here to tell me that nobody's been killed? Why should anyone have been killed? Better tell him I'm Eustace, said Scrub. The boy's Eustace, my lord, hooted the owl as loud as it could. Useless, said the dwarf irritably. I dare say he is. Is that any reason for bringing him to court, hey? Not useless, said the owl. Eustace. Used to it, is he? I don't know what you're talking about, I'm sure. I tell you what it is, Master Glimfeather. When I was a young dwarf, there used to be talking beasts and birds in this country who really could talk. There wasn't all this mumbling and muttering and whispering. It wouldn't have been tolerated for a moment, not for a moment. Sir, Ernest, my trumpet, please. A little fawn who had been standing quietly beside the dwarf's elbow at this time now handed him a silver-eared trumpet. It was made like the musical instrument called a serpent, so that the tube curled right around the dwarf's neck. While he was getting it settled, the owl, Glimfeather, suddenly said to the children in a whisper, My brain my brain's a bit clearer now. Don't say anything about the lost prince. I'll explain later. It wouldn't do. To who? Oh, what a to do. Now, said the dwarf, if you have anything sensible to say, Master Glimfeather, try and say it. Take a deep breath and don't attempt to speak too quickly. With help from the children, and in spite of a fit of coughing on the part of the dwarf, Glimfeather explained that the strangers had been sent by Aslan to visit the court of Narnia. The dwarf glanced quickly up at them with a new expression in his eyes. Sent by the lion himself, hey? He said, and from that other place, beyond the world's end, hey? Yes, my lord, bawled Eustace into the trumpet. Son of Adam and daughter of Eve, hey? Said the dwarf, but people at Experiment House haven't heard of Adam and Eve, so Jill and Eustace couldn't answer this, but the dwarf didn't seem to notice. Yeah, apparently trumpets have ears. The walls have ears, the trees have ears, so why wouldn't a trumpet have an ear too? Well, my dears, he said, taking first one and then the other by the hand and bowing his head a little, you are very heartily welcome. If the good king, my poor master, had not this very hour set sail for 7 Isles, he would have been glad of your coming. It would have brought back his youth to him for a moment, and now it is time for high supper. You shall tell me your business in full council tomorrow morning. Master Glimfeather, see that bedchambers and suitable clothes and all else are provided for these guests in the most honorable fashion. And Glimfeather, in your ear. Here the dwarf put his mouth close to the owl's head, and no doubt intended to whisper, but like other deaf people, he wasn't a very good judge of his own voice, and both children heard him say, "See that they're properly washed." After that the dwarf touched up his donkey, and it set off toward the castle at something between a trot and a waddle. It was a very fat little beast, while the fawn, the owl, and the children followed at a rather slower pace. The sun had set and the air was growing cool. They went across the lawn and then through an orchard and so to the north gate of Caraparavel, which stood wide open. Inside they found a grassy courtyard. Lights were already showing from the windows of the great hall on their right and from a more complicated mass of buildings straight ahead. Into these the owl led them, and there a most delightful person was called to look after Jill. She was not much taller than Jill herself and a good deal slenderer, but obviously full grown, graceful as a willow, and her hair was willowy too, and there seemed to be moss in it. She brought Jill to a round room in one of the turrets. Oh, Sound? Yes? Check, check, check. Full grown, graceful as a willow. No, that's not what I want. Do we have sound? Full grown, graceful as a willow. Sound? Is the sound back? It's back? We're good. You can see me and you can hear me? Yes? Whew. Okay. So that was fun. Always plug in your computer when you know that your computer will not survive. So, that's fun. Okay, now, where the heck were we? I don't even know. Like in the middle of a paragraph, probably. We'll just start back over. Here we go. She was not much taller than Jill herself and a good deal slenderer, but obviously full grown, graceful as a willow, and her hair was willowy too, and there seemed to be moss in it. She brought Jill to a round room in one of the turrets where there was a little bath sunk in the floor and a fire of sweet-smelling woods burning on the flat hearth and a lamp hanging by a silver chain from the vaulted roof. The window looked west into the strange land of Narnia, and Jill saw the red remains of the sunset still glowing behind distant mountains. It made her long for more adventures and feel sure that this was only the beginning. When she had had her bath and brushed her hair and put on the clothes that had been laid out for her, they were the kind that not only felt nice, but looked nice and smelled nice and made nice sounds when you moved as well. She would have gone back to gaze out of that exciting window, but she was interrupted by a bang on the door. "Come in," said Jill, and in came Scrub, also bathed and splendidly dressed in Narnian clothes, but his face didn't look as if he were enjoying it. "Oh, here you are at last," he said crossly, flinging himself into a chair. "I've been trying to find you for ever so long." I can see and hear, but now I have separation anxiety. I mean, maybe you should get like a security stuffed animal, and you'll feel better, Kirk. "Well, now you have," said Jill. "I say, Scrub, isn't it all simply too exciting and scrumptious for words?" She had forgotten all about the signs and the lost prince for the moment. "Oh, that's what you think, is it?" said Scrub, and then after a pause, "I wish to goodness we'd never come." "Why on earth?" "I can't bear it," said Scrub. "Seeing that King Caspian a doddering old man like that, it's frightful." "Why, what harm does it to you?" "Oh, you don't understand. Now that I come to think of it, you couldn't. I didn't tell you that this world has a different time from ours." "How do you mean?" "The time you spend here doesn't take up any of our time. Do you see? I mean, however long we spend here, we shall still get back to Experiment House at the moment we left it." "That won't be much fun." "Oh, dry up, don't keep interrupting. And when you're back in England, in our world, you can't tell how time is going here. It might be any number of years in Narnia, while we're having 1 year at home. The Pevensies explained it all to me, but like a fool, I forgot about it. And now apparently it's been about 70 years, Narnian years, since I was last here. Do you see now? And I come back and find Caspian an old man." "Then the king was an old friend of yours," said Jill. A horrid thought had struck her. "I should jolly well think he was," said Scrub miserably. "About as good a friend as a chap could have, and last time he was only a few years older than me. And to see that old man with a white beard, and to remember Caspian as he was the morning we captured the Lone Islands, or in the fight with the sea serpent. Oh, it's frightful. It's worse than coming back and finding him dead." "Oh, shut up," said Jill impatiently. "It's far worse than you think. We've muffed the first sign." Of course, Scrub did not understand this. Then Jill told him about her conversation with Aslan and the four signs and the task of finding the lost prince which had been laid upon them. Boston Ray Mud Flood Adventures, hello! Hello and welcome! "So you see," she wound up, "you did see an old friend, just as Aslan said, and you ought to have gone and spoken to him at once. And now you haven't, and everything has gone wrong from the very beginning." "But how was I to know?" said Scrub. "If you'd only listened to me when I tried to tell you, we'd be all right," said Jill. "Yes, and if you hadn't played the fool on the edge of that cliff and jolly nearly murdered me." "All right, I said murder, and I'll say it again as often as I like, so keep your hair on." "We'd have come together and we'd both know what to do." "I suppose he was the very first person you saw," said Jill. "You must have been here hours before me. Are you sure you didn't see anyone else first?" "I was only here about a minute before you," said Scrub. "He must have blown you quicker than me, making up for lost time. The time you lost." "Don't be a perfect beast, Scrub," said Jill. "Hello, what's that?" It was the castle bell ringing for supper, and thus what looked like turning into a first-rate quarrel was happily cut short. Both had a good appetite by this time. Supper in the great hall of the castle was the most splendid thing either of them had ever seen, for though Eustace had been in that world before, he had spent his whole visit at sea and knew nothing of the glory and courtesy of the Narnians at home in their own land. The banners hung from the roof, and each course came in with trumpeters and kettle drums. There were soups that would make your mouth water to think of, and the lovely fishes called pavenders, and venison and peacock and pies and ices and jellies and fruit and nuts and all manner of wines and fruit drinks. Even Eustace cheered up and admitted that it was something like. And when all the serious eating and drinking was over, a blind poet came forward and struck up the grand old tale of Prince Cor and Aravis and the horse Bree, which is called The Horse and His Boy, and tells them an adventure that happened in Narnia and Calormen and the lands between, in the golden age when Peter was High King in Cair Paravel. I haven't time to tell it now, though it is well worth hearing. Oh, and you can hear that story in my playlist of The Horse and His Boy. That was book 3 in this series. When they were dragging themselves upstairs to bed, yawning their heads off, Jill said, "I bet we sleep well tonight," for it had been a full day, which just shows how little anyone knows what is going to happen to them next. Okay, chapter 4, A Parliament of Owls. I should have brought my seat in. Feet are tired. It is a very funny thing that the sleepier you are, the longer you take about getting to bed, especially if you are lucky enough to have a fire in your room. Jill felt she couldn't even start undressing unless she sat down in front of the fire for a bit first. Once she had sat down, she didn't want to get up again. She had already said to herself about 5 times, "I must go to bed," when she was startled by a tap on the window. She got up, pulled the curtain, and at first saw nothing but darkness. Then she jumped and started backward, for something very large had dashed itself against the window, giving a sharp tap on the glass as it did so. A very unpleasant idea came into her head. Suppose they have giant moths in this country. Ugh. But then the thing came back, and this time she was almost sure she saw a beak and that the beak had made the tapping noise. It's some huge bird, thought Jill. Could it be an eagle? She didn't very much want a visit, even from an eagle, but she opened the window and looked out. Instantly, with a great whirring noise, the creature alighted on the windowsill and stood there, filling up the whole window, so that Jill had to step back to make room for it. It was the owl. Hush, hush, too hoo, said the owl. Don't make a noise. Now, are you two really in earnest about what you've got to do? About the lost prince, you mean, said Jill. Yes, we've got to be. For now she remembered the lion's voice and face, which she had nearly forgotten during the feasting and storytelling in the hall. Good, said the owl. Then there's no time to waste. You must get You must get away from here at once. I'll go and wake the other human. Then I'll come back for you. You'd better change those court clothes and put on something you can travel in. I'll be back in 2 twos. Too-hoo! And without waiting for an answer, he was gone. It's funny, I wanted to do a stream about Atlantis as well. So either we're tapped in or I don't even know. If Jill had been more used to adventures, she might have doubted the owl's word, but this never occurred to her, and in the exciting idea of a midnight escape, she forgot her sleepiness. She changed back into sweater and shorts. There was a guide's knife on the belt of the shorts, which might come in useful, and added a few of the things that had been left in the room for her by the girl with the willowy hair. She chose a short cloak that came down to her knees and had a hood, just the thing if it rains, she thought, a few handkerchiefs and comb, and then she sat down and waited. She was getting sleepy again when the owl returned. Now we're ready, it said. You'd better lead the way, said Jill. I don't know all these passages yet. Too-hoo, said the owl. We're not going through the castle. That would never do. You must ride on me. We shall fly. Oh, said Jill, and stood with her mouth open, not much liking the idea. Shan't I be far too heavy for you? Too hoo, don't you be a fool. I've already carried the other one. Now, but we'll put out the lamp first. As soon as the lamp was out, the bit of night which you saw through the window looked less dark, no longer black, but gray. The owl stood on the window sill with his back to the room and raised his wings. Jill had to climb onto his short, fat body and get her knees under the wings and grip tight. The feathers felt beautifully warm and soft, but there was nothing to hold on by. I wonder how Scrub liked his ride, thought Jill, and just as she was thinking this, with a horrid plunge, they had left the window sill, and the wings were making a flurry round her ears, and the night air, rather cool and damp, was flying in her face. It was much lighter than she expected, and though the sky was overcast, one patch of watery silver showed where the moon was hiding above the clouds. The fields beneath her looked gray and the trees black. There was a certain amount of wind, a hushing, ruffling sort of wind, which meant that rain was coming soon. The owl wheeled around so that the castle was now ahead of them. Very few of the windows showed lights. They flew right over it, northward, crossing the river. The air grew colder, and Jill thought she could see the white reflection of the owl in the water beneath her. But soon they were on the north bank of the river, flying above wooded country. The owl snapped at something which Jill couldn't see. "Oh, don't, please," said Jill. "Don't jerk like that. You nearly threw me off." "I beg your pardon," said the owl. "I was just nabbing a bat. There's nothing so sustaining in a small way as a nice plump little bat. Shall I catch you one?" "No, thanks," said Jill with a shudder. He was flying a little lower now, and a large black-looking object was looming up toward them. Jill had just time to see that it was a tower, a partly ruinous tower with a lot of ivy on it, she thought, when she found herself ducking to avoid the archway of a window as the owl squeezed with her through the ivied cobwebby opening out of the fresh gray night into a dark place inside the top of the tower. It was rather fusty inside, and the moment she slipped off the owl's back, she knew, as one usually does somehow, that it was quite crowded. And when the voices began saying out of the darkness from every direction, "Too-hoo, too-hoo," she knew it was crowded with owls. She was rather relieved when a very different voice said, "Is that you, Pole? Is that you?" "Is that you, Scrub?" said Jill. "Now," said Glimfeather, "I think we're all here. Let us hold a parliament of owls." "I think your hair is just saying better as a brunette." "Oh, thank you. Yeah, I like the dark, for sure. Need everybody to participate somehow to make it a success. These videos are awesome." Yeah, I mean, I would come on your show, Ray, but I don't know what I would talk about. I mean, like, anybody want to learn about the garden? I've been like painting a lot. I don't know. I don't know what the wisdom that I have is to impart on people. Too-hoo, too-hoo. True for you. That's the right thing to do," said several voices. "Half a moment," said Scrub's voice. "There's something I want to say first." "Do, do, do," said the owls, and Jill said, "Fire ahead." "I suppose all you chaps, owls, I mean," said Scrub, "I suppose you all know that King Caspian the 10th, in his young days, sailed to the eastern end of the world. Well, I was with him on that journey, with him and Reepicheep the mouse, the Lord Drinian, and all of them. I know it sounds hard to believe, but people don't grow older in our world at the same speed as they do in yours. And And what I want to say is this, that I'm the king's man, and if this parliament of owls is any sort of plot against the king, I'm having nothing to do with it." Want to talk about anything? No. I'm High Degree. Hello. Hello and welcome. "Too-hoo, too-hoo, we're all the king's owls too," said the owls. "What's it all about then?" said Scrub. "It's only this," said Glimfeather, "that if the Lord Regent, the dwarf Trumpkin, hears you are going to look for the lost prince, he won't let you start. He'd keep you under lock and key sooner." "Great Scott," said Scrub. "You don't mean that Trumpkin is a traitor? I used to hear a lot about him in the old days at sea. Caspian, the king, I mean, trusted him absolutely." Yeah, yeah, exactly. I want to go to Narnia. It seems so much better than being in this Matrix world. yeah, I was feeling today that I'm just like, man, I just like really don't want to be a part of like the normal world anymore. I just really don't. But I did find a way to mail jam that is cheaper than it had been. So if anyone wants to buy any jam, I am yeah, I'm in like the jam business. So I make really good blackberry, and I made a spicy one, and yeah, so buy some jam for me from me. "Oh, no," said a voice. "Trumpkin's no traitor, but more than 30 champions, knights, centaurs, good giants, and all sorts, have at one time or another set out to look for the lost prince, and none of them have ever come back. And at last the king said he was not going to have all the bravest Narnians destroyed in the search for his son, and now nobody is allowed to go." "But surely he'd let us go," said Scrub, "when he knew who I was and who had sent me." "Sent both of us," put in Jill. Come on the show and talk about my jam? I mean, okay. I mean, I can, sure. Um, I am, I mean, yeah, it would be nice to sell to local people, but if I can ship it and it's not that much to ship it, I have no problem shipping it. And before it was really expensive, but I found a company called Shippo that you can ship stuff for cheaper. So yeah. Tomorrow, what's tomorrow? Thursday? Um, I mean, yeah, I could come on tomorrow. Not mentally prepared. But I mean, yeah, I don't have anything going on, so I can come on tomorrow. So yeah. Yes, said Glimfeather. "I think very likely he would, but the king's away, and Trumpkin will stick to the rules. He's as true as steel, but he's deaf as a post and very peppery. You could never make him see that this might be the time for making an exception to the rule. You might think he'd show starts at 9:30. Okay. Yeah, I'll definitely hop in chat, and I can hop on stream too. So yeah, whatever works. You might think he'd take some notice of us. Yeah, Trumpkin. It's so good. "Because we're owls and everyone knows how wise owls are," said someone else. "But he's so old now he'd only say, 'You're a mere chick. I remember when you were an egg. Don't come trying to teach me, sir, crabs and crumpets.'" This owl imitated Trumpkin's voice rather well, and there were sounds of owlish laughter all round. The children began to see that the Narnians all felt about Trumpkin as people feel at school about some crusty teacher whom everyone is a little afraid of and everyone makes fun of and nobody really dislikes. "How long is the king going to be away?" asked Scrub. "If only we knew," said Glimfeather. "You see, there has one sec. Doo, 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 doo. Give me one sec. That's not what I wanted. Can't think and talk at the same time, apparently. Okay, I just had to screenshot your email so that I can email you. Crusty teacher. Yeah, you know we've all had one. Where did we leave off? How long is the king going to be away? Asked Scrub. If only we knew, said Glimfeather. You see, there has been a rumor lately that Aslan himself has been set up in the islands in Terabithia, I think it was, and the king said he would make one more attempt before he died to see Aslan face to face again and ask his advice about who is to be king after him. But we're all afraid that if he doesn't meet Aslan in Terabithia, he'll go on east to Seven Isles and Lone Islands and on and on. He never talks about it, but we all know he has never forgotten that voyage to the world's end. I'm sure in his heart of hearts he wants to go there again. I mean, if I got to the world's end, I don't think that would be something I would forget. So, yeah. Then there's no good waiting for him to come back, said Jill. No, no good, said the owl. Oh, what a to-do! If only you two had known and spoken to him at once, he'd have arranged everything, probably given you an army to go with you in search of the prince. Jill kept quiet at this and hoped Scrub would be sporting enough not to tell all the owls why this hadn't happened. He was, or very nearly. That is, he only muttered under his breath, well, it wasn't my fault, before saying out loud, very well, we'll have to manage without it. But there's just one more thing I want to know. If this Owl's Parliament, as you call it, is all fair and above board and means no mischief, why does it have to be so jolly secret? Meeting in a ruin in the dead of night and all that? Where is your heart of hearts anyway? I don't know. It's probably like when the Grinch's heart grows 3 times. It's probably like the inner layer. It's the heart of hearts. I have no idea. To who, hooted several owls. Where shall we meet? Why, when would anyone meet except at night? You see, explained Glimfeather, most of the creatures in Narnia have such unnatural habits. They do things by day in broad blazing sunlight, when everyone ought to be asleep. And as a result, at night, they're so blind and stupid that you can't get a word out of them. So we owls have got into the habit of meeting at sensible hours on our own when we want to talk about things. I see, said Scrub. Well, now, let's get on. Tell us all about the lost prince. Then an old owl, not Glimfeather, related the story. About 10 years ago it appeared, when Rilian, the son of Caspian, was a very young knight, he rode with the queen, his mother, on a May morning in the north parts of Narnia. They had many squires and ladies with them, and all wore garlands of fresh leaves on their heads and horns at their side. But they had no hounds with them, for they were maying, not hunting. In the warm part of the day they came to a pleasant glade where a fountain flowed freshly out of the earth, and there they dismounted and ate and drank and were merry. After a time the queen felt sleepy, and they spread cloaks for her on the grassy bank, and Prince Rilian with the rest of the army went a little way from her, that their tales and laughter might not wake her. And so presently a great serpent came out of the thick wood and stung the queen in her hand. All heard her cry out and rushed toward her, and Rillian was first at her side. He saw the worm gliding away from her and made after it with his sword drawn. It was great, shining, and as green as poison, so that he could see it well, but it glided away into thick bushes, and he could not come at it. So he returned to his mother and found them all busy about her. But they were busy in vain, for at the first glance of her face, Rillian knew that no physic in the world would do her good. As long as the life was in her, she seemed to be trying hard to tell him something, but she could not speak clearly, whatever her message was, and she died without delivering it. It was then hardly 10 minutes since they had first heard her cry. They carried the dead queen back to Cair Paravel, and she was bitterly mourned by Rillian and by the king and by all Narnia. She had been a great lady, wise and gracious and happy, King Caspian's bride, whom he had brought home from the eastern end of the world, and men said that the blood of the stars flowed in her veins. The prince took his mother's death very hardly, as well he might. After that, he was always riding on the northern marches of Narnia, hunting for that venomous worm to kill it and be avenged. No one remarked on this, though the prince came home from these wanderings looking tired and distraught. But about a month after the queen's death, some said they could see a change in him. There was a look in his eyes of a man who has seen visions, and though he would be out all day, his horse did not bear signs of hard riding. His chief friend among the older courtiers was the Lord Drinian, who had been his father's captain on that great voyage to the east parts of the world. One evening, Drinian said to the prince, "Your highness must soon give over seeking the worm. There is no true vengeance on a witless brute as there might be on a man. You weary yourself in vain." The prince answered him, "My lord, I have almost forgotten the worm these 7 days." Drinian asked him why, if that were so, he rode so continually in the northern woods. "My lord," said the prince, "I have seen there the most beautiful thing that was ever made." "Fair prince," said Drinian, "of your courtesy let me ride with you tomorrow, that I may see this fair thing." "With a good will," said Rillian. Then, in the good time on the next day, they saddled their horses and rode a great gallop into the northern woods and alighted at the same fountain where the queen got her death. Drinian thought it strange that the prince chose that place of all places to linger, and there they rested till it came to high noon. And at noon, Drinian looked up and saw the most beautiful lady he had ever seen, and she stood at the north side of the fountain and said no word, but beckoned to the prince with her hand as if she bade him to come to her. And she was tall and great, shining and wrapped in a thin garment as green as poison. And the prince stared at her like a man out of his wits. But suddenly the lady was gone. Drinian knew not where, and they too returned to Cair Paravel. It stuck in Drinian's mind that this shining green woman was evil. Drinian doubted very much whether he ought not to tell this adventure to the king, but he had little wish to be a blab and a talebearer, and so he held his tongue. But afterward he wished he had spoken, for next day Prince Rillian rode out alone. That night he came not back, and from that hour no trace of him was ever found in Narnia, nor any neighboring land, and neither his horse, nor his hat, nor his cloak, nor anything else was ever found. Then Drinian, in the bitterness of his heart, went to Caspian and said, "Lord King, slay me speedily as a great traitor, for by my silence I have destroyed your son." And he told him the story. Then Caspian caught up a battle axe and rushed upon the Lord Drinian to kill him, but Drinian stood still as stock for the death blow. But when the axe was raised, Caspian suddenly threw it away and cried out, I have lost my queen and my son. Shall I lose my friend also? And he fell upon the Lord Jurnian's neck and embraced him, and both wept, and their friendship was not broken. Such was the story of Rillian. And when it was over, Jill said, I bet that serpent and that woman were the same person. True, true, we think the same as you, hooted the owls. But we don't think she killed the prince, said Glimfeather, because no bones. We know she didn't, said Scrub. Aslan told Pole he was still alive somewhere. That almost makes it worse, said the oldest owl. It means she has some use for him, and some deep scheme against Narnia. Long, long ago, at the very beginning, a white witch came out of the north and bound our land in snow and ice for 100 years, and we think this may be of the same crew. We have like one page left, so I think you'll make it, Eric. Very well, then, said Scrub. Pole and I have got to find this prince. Can you help us? Have you any clue, you two? Asked Glimfeather. Yes, said Scrub. We know we've got to go north, and we know we've got to reach the ruins of a giant city. At this, there was a greater to-hooing than ever, and noises of birds shifting their feet and ruffling their feathers, and then all of the owls started speaking at once. They all explained how very sorry they were that they themselves could not go with the children on their search for the lost prince. You'd want to travel by day, and I've got a frog in my throat. It's choking me. And we'd want to travel by night, they said. It wouldn't do, wouldn't do. One or two owls added that even here in the ruined tower wasn't nearly so dark as it had been when they had begun, and that the Parliament had been going on quite long enough. In fact, the mere mention of a journey to the ruined city of giants seemed to have dampened the spirits of those birds. But Glimfeather said, Thank you, Barbara. Glimfeather said, if they want to go that way into Etinsmar, we best take them to one of the marsh wiggles. They're the only people who can help them much. True, true, though, said the owls. Come on, then, said Glimfeather. I'll take one. Who'll take the other? It must be done tonight. I will, as far as the marsh wiggles, said another owl. Are you ready? Asked Glimfeather to Jill. I think Pole's asleep, said Scrub. That is the end of another 2 chapters. Where I will email you. And let's see. Hello to Eric Julian and Barbara Zena Bear, Boston Ring Mud Flood Adventures, Ariel Truth Seeker, Sue Finelli. I am High Degree. Okay, I think that's everyone. So yeah, I might be on Ray's channel tomorrow, talk about my jam or whatever else. We'll see. So yeah, I will email you, Ray. My throat is messed up. And then Monday, I will be live on my channel at 4:30 Pacific Standard Time, 7:30 Eastern Standard Time. And Waters Above will be joining me, and we're going to be doing conspiracy trivia in Waters World conspiracy trivia with Jennifer and Dottie. So stop by on Monday, play some trivia, and we'll have a great time. So I guess Karen is not going to put on a spring meetup in South Carolina because I haven't heard anything. Yeah, she said she's not doing Solar Return. She mentioned possibly something else early summer. Not in any way confirmed or definite. But yeah, Solar Return is not happening. So Yeah, I'm definitely gonna get out of here because I'm super tired. I still have to do a painting, so probably get it done in like an hour. Go to bed at 10, but I'm gonna get out of here. Jenny T.I. Murphy, hello. Thank you for being here. So, yes, thank you all for being here. And yeah, my next show, well, I'll probably be on with Ray tomorrow, but then Monday Night Trivia, Conspiracy Trivia, Water's World, Conspiracy Trivia. Such a long name. I don't even know. I don't even know what I'm saying. Just like so tired. Anyway, thank you all for being here. I will see you all on the flat side. Story time next week at 8 p.m. So much love, everyone. Bye.